Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast with your host, Brandon Seigel. I'm a published author, speaker, entrepreneur, and private practice strategist dedicated to transforming the way that healthcare functions. This podcast is all about empowering you to create the change you want to see. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I am joined again by the great Leila Adnani from PS Creative and PS Creative Studios. Thank you, Leila, for joining us. Today, we're going to jump right in. We're talking about content. Now, I just actually said something that I think is true, which is, content we always say is king, but distribution is queen. And so understanding the role of how we create content that we can distribute and convert it is everything. And this is how we build our online presence. So Leila, why don't we jump into it and talk about what content actually works for private practices? What should we be doing to actually generate real inquiries versus engagement? I find that there's vanity engagement and then there's real engagement. So how does that work with content? What are you seeing that works? What are you seeing that's not working?
What I've been seeing working, especially in your space, is speaking directly to what the patient's fear or question is. So it's going to sound boring, but it's really asking those questions that you would go into ChatGPT to find answers to. Is this symptom normal with my 6-year-old? How do I know if I need to see a specialist if my child is still having trouble with feeding problems at this stage in life? Being able to answer those very, very specific questions is critical. So there's 2 ways that this is going to benefit you. Of course, there's the trust factor of seeing the expert actually answer the very specific question that was in the back of the decision maker's mind, which is the parent. And then secondly, it's exactly what ChatGPT wants to recommend when someone is actually going to ChatGPT to find a solution. And you say, hey, and then it goes and it says, oh, actually, I found a great resource. Brandon actually talked about this, blank, 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 blank. And then it provides you a citation. You can go watch that video. You can see, okay, what practice is the best for me in order to do that. But answering them just very, very granular is a great place to start. Of what are you getting asked all the time? Answer those. Mirror your content to being what a real Google search would look like. And then meeting the provider. We want to know who is working behind the scenes, right? You would not want to take your daughter to be seen for something if you don't genuinely know and trust who is going to be taking care of her on a weekly basis. So giving your staff and team that time to shine is great. What we've seen a lot, though, is that your staff is like, I like being behind the scenes. I don't want to be in front of the camera. It's going to take some coaxing. It really is. But once you get people to feel a little bit more comfortable in being able to share their stories, their expertise, what led them to being an integral part of your team, you're going to be able to see a huge jump in ROI with that type of content. And then patient outcome stories. Recently, we had a patient come to us with this, this, and this. And through these remedies, this type of 6 weeks of doing blank, blank, and blank, we were able to achieve this outcome. We're now only seeing that patient once a month. Great. That shows a huge success story. And then sharing your testimonials, right? If they took the time to go put it on your Google business profile, you don't need to ask for permission again to be able to take that and put that onto your social media. So if you need just easy bake content that you can put onto your page, that goes a long way. If someone lands on your Instagram, your TikTok, any other platform that you're utilizing, they say, oh, wow, look at all these really good reviews that I'm scrolling through as I'm going through these videos. That makes you look really, really good and paints that picture of, I can trust this person. And then condition-specific content is great. Being able to talk about feeding issues on a very, very deep level and just honing in on that. Doing content series, that's worked out really, really well for practices.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And one of the things you really touched on that I think is true is we live in a world that we ask questions. So the idea that we create content around our FAQs, it's just so crucial. Like what is it like? What's an evaluation like? What do most people do when they get an early diagnosis of autism with their child? Like these different things, the more real these FAQs are, the more that we're able to link content that actually resonates with people. The other thing that I just want to kind of harp in, and I suck at this, so I'll be honest with you in that sense, but we live in this world of what I call reality television. Reality television right now outranks in reviews than your typical storyline TV. The the people that see your patients every day have direct line sight with them. And the more that we can show our patients inside the day to day with that person they trust, the more that there becomes authentic relationships. There's a difference when you're creating what I call as a valence experience, meaning like I go to Disneyland and I know that I'm not seeing the person behind Mickey Mouse. Like I know that I'm dealing with a valence of like, oh my God, it's a castle. And I think that the hardest thing about Disneyland is as you get older, the magic rubs off. And some of you will disagree with me, but I'll be honest. I go to Disneyland and I miss the way it looked as a kid. I miss what that magic felt like. And I even to my kids, I'm like, oh my God, they're like, oh Dad, don't you love it? And I'm like, it's okay. They're like, what? You don't like Disney? I'm like, I just remember it through a different lens. So we want our people to reflect the real lens that we expect of them day in and day out. And so sometimes these videos that we're showing and the content we're generating is what we think idealistically should be versus reality. And the problem is that if you create an idealistic video, you're setting people up for disappointment. So
I completely agree with that.
like, have you ever seen these videos of something like somewhere you want to go? Let's just say, I know you're a huge traveler. You love travel. And I show you this video of Bali, where you're like, oh my God, the beauty and the blue and the this and that. And then you show up at the resort and it looks like a swamp. You're like, what is this? Like, there's nothing there. And they're like, oh, well, when we opened, that's what it really looked like. I'm like, well, not anymore. So recognizing that
You don't want to
to
bait and
create.
switch your audience.
Yeah.
100%. You don't want to do bait and switch content. In the other content that doesn't convert, to get back to that, is a lot of practices do this. Inspirational quotes. It doesn't move the needle. Don't. It's wasting space on your feed. Get rid of it. Generic health awareness posts, also unimportant. Don't need to post those, at least on a very frequent basis. And then content that's educational but doesn't have any type of emotional connection also typically doesn't go very well. There's a couple of doctors that I like to follow on social platforms, and they relate the content back to your life. They say, right now, people over the age of 50 are dying at the rate of X, Y, and Z from this ailment. If you don't want that to be your outcome, here's the 5 things that you can do. That just spoke to me emotionally. I don't want that to be my outcome. I'm a handful of years away from 50. That's terrifying, right? Versus saying, here's the ailment, here's what you can do about it. And then the data at the end is, by the way, people over 50 are dying in droves from this, right? It's about how you position and lay that content out. It's kind of how you create your podcast episodes. You want to lead with bringing people into the conversation, and then you want to be able to educate them. But if you just right off the bat, you're like, okay, today we're in class, everybody sit down, get your notebooks out, let's go. Your audience is going to be like, okay, well, I needed you to warm me up a little bit to why this is relevant to me. And I think a lot of the times with social media content, that's where we're going wrong. We're just saying, here's the content, let me shove it out. Here's the content, let me shove it out. But why is that relevant to the person on the other side, your ideal customer? The next thing is, are we creating content for our ideal customer profile? Or are we creating content for the sake of creating content? Like you said, a time-wasting activity that makes you feel good because at least you're being active and consistent on social media. And I applaud anybody who's being active and consistent. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is now we got to get better at it. So the ideal customer profile of, let's think about exactly what we want to walk through those doors or purchase our product. And let's think about what we don't want. Who is the person that we don't want? Because we should talk to them too. This is not a service for you if you are not willing to invest $5,000 a month, be consistent, do this, do that, do this. Don't even bother picking up the phone. Getting rid of people, especially when we do marketing, is so valuable because I want to only talk to 10 leads. I don't want to talk to 50 leads because they're not all going to be qualified. So let's dequalify people from the get-go so that we can save people in person a little bit of time.
Absolutely. Now, we talk about consistency, and I know we're both big believers that in content, consistency matters. And I even want you to look at, like, there are podcasts that they stopped in February and they said they'll return soon and they still haven't returned. Okay. Months later, they've lost me now. The trust and consistency has been broken. There's been no updates, no nothing, whatever. I'm like, okay, that's a dead podcast. I don't understand why content doesn't have closure. And so, like, I'm being honest, like, I used to
That's
be,
a good way of putting it. I like that.
I want closure with my content. So if you're going to end with closure. So it's so interesting. I remember I was really upset. There was a podcast that Jay Cutler, the football player, had, and I listened to it on a regular basis. And one day it just stopped. It just stopped. And I was like searching articles, like, did he get fired? What happened? Like, when you're really engaging an audience, there has to be a story to that content with an arc and closure and all of that. And so I used to think that quantity was the king, but I think quality and consistency are the chief. What is the minimum viable quantity that people should be posting per week or whatnot when they're looking at content? Like, how do we drive that difference between, obviously there's continuity, but then what is the quantity needed? How often should we be posting? I told the story earlier that, one time a month was the podcast. Now we're 2 times a week plus. And I want people to know that I personally don't see exponential change in audience because I increased, but I am giving more content to the world. And so that evergreen content brings, with every piece of content, there's value. But the key is the consistency. If I had just, hey, I'm wrapping this up, season 2 is coming up in a month, whatever that may be. And so how do you define what quantity looks like in today's content generating world?
Everything depends, I would say, on your platform. So, for example, with your podcast, at your bare minimum, and we have a lot of calls with people like, I'm just going to do a podcast quarterly. And I say, well, don't work with me because that's a waste of my time. You are not going to build an audience by doing it quarterly. Monthly is incredibly difficult, but you've got to remember, too, that in this digital wave, right now where we're at, there's a lot of competition. What you had going in 2020 is that people were not in their offices. They were not at work. They were out taking walks. They were looking to be able to improve their business, even though they weren't able to really run their business. So that was a beautiful set of circumstances right there. And I am so happy that you had such a perfect moment in time with that. But now we are an addicted society, right? You're always scrolling on your phone. People are spending more and more time in front of their screens. So the more that they get to see and learn from you, I think the better if you're putting out good content. For your podcast, once a week is your absolute bare minimum. I think twice a week is great, but it always will depend on your content format as well. I think that closure is a big deal. I've had some shows and things that I would watch, and then all of a sudden they were gone, and I was like, I don't understand. Like, nobody said that we were wrapping this up and that this was like a limited series or something. So also hate that. You need to be clear that, hey, if you're closing up shop on something, that you're letting people know. But then when it comes to your content mix, I think that's important because I know that getting video content, especially in the private practice setting, can be difficult, and you have to have a strategic plan to do that. So if you can put 2 to 3 video pieces out that are genuinely worthwhile every week, they aren't just the gimmicky what's trending right now on TikTok of like chasing someone around an office and then, you pop a balloon. If you're putting out the quality stuff 2 to 3 times a week, I think that that's really, really great. And you're going to start to see an uptick. But with you, for example, you're putting out a lot. That's helping your name as the search engine optimization piece across every platform. It's helping WellnessWorks across every platform because all of those pieces of content that go out into this universe are tagged with those businesses, with your name. And now if someone looks you up, it's a huge presence versus being like, okay, it looks like he owns a business and had a podcast that, was back in 2020. It's a completely different story that somebody is now able to read about you. So I think that's where consistency becomes really, really cool, is that when someone does type your name into Google, they get a completely different picture of you and your business. So let's think about it from the business standpoint of wow, this is a very, very consistent private practice. Look at all of these resources that I have and the ability to learn more about them and to consume. And the other thing is now a lot of people, you'll go and you'll say, oh, I want to go to this restaurant. Let me go look at their Instagram. Oh, they don't have an Instagram. Well, now I don't know if I really want to go because there's no pictures, right? Like I want to see what they've curated and what they thought was important about themselves. So that silent trust factor that comes with having your presence and then being consistent with it is a big deal. When I go and I click on a restaurant and they haven't updated or added pictures in the last 6 months, I'm like, are they going out of business? Is this the end for them? That's my immediate thought. So if I'm this way, I can't imagine I'm alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something that I've recognized since creating content is also not everyone that likes our content is a client of our content. Meaning, like, it's so funny. So my son, big baseball player, everyone knows or loves baseball, and his coach came up to me the other day, and his coach speaks only Spanish. His coach does not speak English. And
Does
his
your
coach
son speak
started
Spanish?
following the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast feed on Instagram. And he's like, I'm like, what do you want? He's like, energy. I'm like, okay, that's what he likes. He's like, I just like your energy. Like, none of this stuff is relevant to him or anything, but sometimes we just need 30 seconds of energy of a redhead looking like his pop's going to go off. So I bring it up only because we never know the way that our content will impact our ecosystem and the world that we serve. And we don't know who he's going to come across and tell his physician, check this out or this or that. And so understanding that content is not just a one-to-one action, it really is a universal action that can impact in so many different ways. It's kind of like an onion, all these layers that we're peeling back in order to get to the root cause of what we're trying to do as a business. So one of the things I want to talk to you, because there's so many different ways we can spend money in marketing. What is the biggest waste of marketing budget you're seeing small business owners or private practice owners are making right now? Where are they losing their ROI that you see?
Based on conversations I had post growth code, I can answer this one pretty well. Running paid ads and then driving someone to their homepage, their landing page, not a funnel, not a page that speaks directly to whatever was on the ad, just to their website homepage, just dropping them right there. That does not convert. It just doesn't work. You need to be specific. I would not even necessarily most of the time take and run an ad and drop them onto someone's homepage. Secondly, if you are running ads, a lot of them aren't actually tracking. So they'll just say, well, it's set up in the back on Meta, and I just assume that, I can look and see my data, but there's so many layers that are deeper than that. And that's why we have a paid ads expert on our team, because I'm not the expert. I don't want to become the expert. It's very, very convoluted and very confusing. But that data that you can uncover of how long somebody is spending on these different pages, you can then retarget to them. Hey, they didn't fill out a form. Let's make sure they see this again. Let's throw another different type of ad for that same company onto their feed. See if we can re-engage in that. So not taking the time to set it up properly. Third thing is, if you are running ads, people are boosting them on Instagram. Instagram will say, hey, do you want to add $10 to this post and you can increase your reach to 2 million people? And that's so enticing. You're at the casino. You're like, okay, I put $10 in and I could win 20 million. Like, that's so cool. But that is literally just feeding the meta machine. It does not ever lead to an increase in leads, but it will give you a vanity metric that 50 million people saw your post, but no actions came from it. But we get high on the dopamine, right? And we're like, oh, wow, I'm doing the right thing. This feels good, but it's not leading to any ROI. And then also paying for social media strategy and management without actually having a clear goal in mind. So a lot of people are like, oh, I know I need to be more consistent on social, but I don't really know what my goal is, or my practice already has enough people, so do I even need to do social media? A lot of that kind of commentary. And you got to remember, there's different levels of social media strategy. Like for us, if we're doing a hardcore large scale strategy, it is very, very, very involved. And it is also very, very, very expensive, because that's what that takes. It's not just taking, say, podcast content and putting it back out into the universe. It's a completely different onion, if you will. So thinking that it's a one size fits all is something that I've seen a lot of people get into trouble with. Or, oh, I hired somebody to do it and I didn't see any return from it. That I hear that often. And that's because we didn't really have a clear goal in mind of what we were doing, or we hired our cousin who has an Instagram page of their own and they thought that that was going to be the end all be all, but doesn't really understand the whole ecosystem and how it's changing every single day.
Mm-hmm. So we have to define with clarity where we're trying and what we're trying to achieve. And I agree. I think most people look for the easy fixes. And so they're like, hey, $20 boost. Like, I can afford that. Like, if I get one client, that's great. And then it doesn't go anywhere. Then I throw another 20. It's like a slot machine. So I do agree with that in that sense. The other thing I'll share is I think we're not measuring the lifetime value of a customer. So often and what we're not looking at is the lifetime net value. So I'll say it this way, Leila. If you say, hey, Brandon, the lifetime value of you as a client is ABC, that's different than the lifetime net value, meaning that there's an expense that you're spending for the revenue I bring in. So let's just, for round numbers, say lifetime value of your client's $100,000, but it might take 80,000 to generate that 100. So then the lifetime net value is 20,000. So if you're going to drop 17,000 to acquire that client, that's a lot of risk for a $3,000 benefit is my point. And so really understanding that lifetime net benefit versus your cost acquisition metric, because a lot of the time we're not even seeing what's the actual acquisition cost of a client. And so I'm shocked how many people also waste money marketing and doing ads when they have nothing to sell. Like literally, they're like, hey, we're full, but I'm afraid that I won't be full. So I'm going to continue to spend $5,000 a month on ads. And I'm like, really? Okay. What do you do with those? Well, we have them. We talk to them. We see if we can hold them on the side. I'm like, how many of those convert eventually? Well, I don't know that. I'm like, so you're just throwing money out the door. And so we have to be intentional in this business if we want to stay in this business. So,
I mean, even for us, when we run an ad campaign on Meta, it's a faucet. That's how I look at it. Okay, we've had 4 new clients signed from this ad campaign. That's all we really needed for the next 2 months. We'll turn the faucet back on when we are ready to be able to onboard and get, let's say, 3 to 4 new people going. Of course, we're a higher ticket than what we're talking about in terms of a lot of these private practices. So I'm sure they could accept sometimes 5 to 10 new clients every week. It all depends on your onboarding, of course. But for me, it's you don't have to just keep the ads on out of fear. You literally get to decide, turn the lever on, turn the lever off. But that only works if you've built a really, really solid campaign that does convert. And so to get to that point, there's typically a lot of testing that's going to go in, and there's going to be a lot of failure. And you got to kind of push past that failure point, because what we get is all of these people wanting that the first ad I put out is just it's going to rain money. People are just going to be calling me. They can't wait to sign up. I'm not going to have to do anything. And rarely does that work. And if that were the situation, then those companies who are able to do that would be the most profitable companies in the world. But it often takes a lot of different iterations before we strike that really nice ad balance that now is getting us the qualified people to take action.
Well, and that's why often research and testing is what drives marketing results. But that costs money. A/B testing, all these different things, understanding your market, understanding your keywords, and recognizing that at any day something can get thrown off. Like it's kind of like being in an environment. Today you step out and it's sunny, and 3 hours from now it's hailing. Your whole environment and road conditions and everything changes. How you get where you're trying to get, that destination is going to look different. And so, the bottom line when we're looking at building your presence online is I think you have to innovate with people that specialize in this market. You need to have a destination in hand that you're trying to achieve. And you need to be tracking KPIs that measure not just the return on investment, but is that juice worth the squeeze? And so there's a lot of things happening in today's environment. And I think there's so much help out there. Leila, obviously, I love what you guys are doing. How can our audience get in touch with you?
You can visit us at pscreative.co, psstudios.co, and you can always email me, Leila at pscreative.co.
Wonderful. Thank you again for joining us for this episode of the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. Don't forget, write a review, like us, subscribe, share us with your digital net, because together we can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for tuning in to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. Exciting news. We're now available everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. So watch, listen, and reach out. If you love this episode, please drop a 5-star review. It truly means the world to me. Are you looking for more ways to elevate your practice? If so, now is your chance. Reach out, go to my website, or email me at brandon@wellnessworksmp.com. And remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.